and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm here to tell you I'm an idiot because last week I bought the DJI Avata 2 drone, which is the case here and the drone itself. And yes, yesterday I did destroy it and I've only had this a few days. In fact, this was only my third time flying it. Today I stripped it open and I'm going to try and fix it though. So come on, let's see if I can manage it, or will I just break it even further? Now, I've owned several drones over the years, but this is my first FPV drone, as you can see. And the motion controller, as good as it is, it's just not as good as a dedicated controller, which, by the way, I ordered only about 3 hours before I completely totaled this drone. And sorry, that's the motion controller, by the way. Now, I knew I was going to crash this drone because I am never happy doing the normal and I always want to push myself to the max. And while flying the Avata 2 at full speed in sports mode, only my third time flying this, I managed to clip a branch of a tree as I was turning while passing it, and the drone went spinning dramatically out of control and hit the ground hard. Now, there was no way of stopping it. It was completely out of control at max speed. So when I got to the drone, I was more than surprised to see the gimbal was obviously damaged. Now, years of working as an electronics technician and repairing cameras, I immediately tried to fix it on the spot, and after a bit of manipulation, I got it to look like this. Now, even at that point, it wasn't fixed, but at least it was kind of back in position again. I switched the drone on then to see if there was any life in it, and it came on, but there was a gimbal warning saying the motor was overloaded. So obviously enough, there was still something wrong with the gimbal. So I checked the gimbal position on screen and it said it was centered or in the horizontal position. I switched off the drone and went back to base, which is where I am now. Now, the one luck I had here is I was actually using a newer ND filter. So if I hold that fella up along, and that seemed to take an awful lot of the damage, and it helped protect the lens from even more serious damage again. So I'm really delighted I put that on the camera. So for me going forward now, I realised an ND filter and a gimbal guard are vital for these drones. Funnily enough, I didn't order a gimbal guard before now, as I watched several videos where people state they're a waste and not necessary. But from my limited experience of flying an FPV drone, I can tell you now, a gimbal guard would have saved this from happening, and it would have prevented my drone from being completely totaled. I stripped down the drone and got to this part where the cage is off the gimbal now. And by the way, if you're going to attempt this, I have a massive word of warning for you here. The IMU at the back of the gimbal itself, there's a very small cable or ribbon cable going from that onto the main board itself. And it's fairly tight when it's in this position. So be very careful not to put any pressure on it, as it could tear and then you are in a whole heap of trouble. Now, if you want to know how you can strip it down to this point, I'm going to pop that up at the end of the video where I explain it to you and what screws to take out and everything else to get it looking like this. So getting back to the repair then, I slowly started to examine the gimbal itself. And the one thing I knew was it was in the center position. So what I tried doing is I tried pushing it back into position again. So on both sides, I clamped the bracket with my 2 fingers and applied a small bit of pressure while it was in the center position. And I moved the camera or the gimbal up and down to see could I find any spot where it seemed to fit just that little bit better. Now, I kept increasing pressure more and more each time I was doing this. And at one stage, I felt like a tiny little give at one point where it was more or less centered. And I was thinking, this sounds a small bit more promising. So I applied slightly more pressure and the gimbal seemed to go back into place. Now, is it in the right place and will it work? I genuinely don't know as of yet, but I'm very hopeful. Now, I'm going to pop it back together and test it out. So let's find out together if I managed to fix it or not. And if I didn't, this was a really expensive mistake. And the other word of warning I have for you is, if you do open out your gimbal like this, then obviously enough your warranty is void. But at the same time, I've already crashed this and done a serious bit of damage, so I'd imagine my warranty is void anyway. So I said, look, I may as well go ahead and fix it and see what I can do. It's an educational and a learning experience for me. And I also love tinkering at things like this. So anyway, stop talking and let's put it back together and see, does it work? Fingers crossed. So this is 15 minutes later now after what you just previously watched, and I have the drone put back together. And I made sure to use Loctite and everything else too as well, and the screws for the motor assemblies and whatnot. So it should be ready, and the gimbal appears to be performing fairly well. So I am reasonably optimistic, but there's only one way we're going to find out if this works or not. I'm going to switch on the drone now. Moment of truth. Moment of truth. Will it work? Ooh, the gimbal did glitch. The gimbal did glitch. Unable to take off. Failed to load dynamic safety data. Make sure surroundings are safe. Yes, yes, yes. That's all fine. It's working. It's working. Ha ha ha. Cool. The gimbal is working. So this drone is going to survive to crash another day. How cool is that? So if you want to know how to fix your DJI Avata 2 gimbal, I hope this helped you to some extent, and it put a smile on my face if nothing else. I was fully convinced I was going to have to buy another one, and also that I was going to completely learn from my mistake. And by the way, my FPV 3 controller from DJI is arriving tomorrow. So it's quite windy outside today, so I will not be taking this back out long again. And the keen eye of you might have also noticed there's quite a bit of grass and whatnot around the actual prop blades and whatnot. What that actually is, they're leaves, because what I was doing was I was going so close to the ground where I was actually flying. The hedges had been cut recently. So there was quite a few leaves and whatnot around the place, but when I was flying so close to the ground, it was actually blowing the leaves away and blowing some of them forward, obviously enough. The leaves were then coming back over along here and they were being sucked back down into the propeller blades. So they're only very light leaves, but that's what all the green gunk and everything else is here on the side of the actual prop guards themselves. So I haven't crashed it a lot, I promise you. But that was my very first crash with the Avata 2, and thankfully I managed to fix it. So lesson learned, and you might well say, what was that lesson? Well, that lesson was twofold. The first was always use an ND filter. If I hold this out, I don't know if you can see that. I'm looking off my monitor here now to see, is it focusing on me or is it focusing on the ND filter? And it's focusing on me. There you go. That's the ND filter. You can quite clearly see that is completely destroyed. That took the main brunt of the impact, I would imagine, and that saved the lens on the camera itself from getting scratched. So definitely use an ND filter. Highly recommend it. Well, even from the cinematic point of view, I said cinematic, but even from that point of view, from a videography point of view, you can slow down your shutter speed and you can obey the 180-degree rule. So that makes a lot more sense to use an ND filter anyway. The second thing then is the actual gimbal guards. I would highly recommend you get those. Really and truly, as I say, first time flying this drone and I destroyed the gimbal. But again, I'm an idiot and I know it. I know I'm an idiot. But if you're an idiot, definitely get a gimbal guard too as well. Stay tuned if you want to watch how to strip down your gimbal to get into that section. If not, see you out there and see you in the next video. Now, the one thing you could try doing here before you actually go to the trouble of stripping the whole gimbal open is try and pinch it both here and here with your fingers. Pinch it and squeeze in slightly, and then try and adjust the gimbal, and then gently apply more pressure until it pops back in place, which is more or less what I did. But I knew where the gimbal was first. I checked it beforehand. It was at the center or the horizontal point. Now, if you want to take off the plastic cage, you have to remove the screw here, remove the screw here, this screw here, and this screw here. Then on the base, we have a screw here, 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 and here. There's also two screws here and here, but these screws have like hot melt glue or something just stuck into the middle of it. There's a bit of plastic gunk. You need to just pop that out first, and then you can remove those two screws. Then there's a screw on the side here, and there's another screw here just underneath that sticker. So when you have all those screws removed, then what I'd recommend is opening that screw here and this screw here. Take this section off because there's little catches underneath here too as well holding this on. Then on this unit, it lifts up slightly and it can pop forward, and the same on this side. And there's little plastic catches here and here, so you will naturally feel a small bit of resistance. The black base section needs to pull down, and by pulling that down, you give it enough space for the cage to actually come out. That's why you have to loosen all these screws along the bottom here. Once you get the case out, then you can apply pressure and move it up and down along, as I suggested in the video. And fingers crossed, that is going to fix your Avata 2 drone for you. Thanks again for watching, and if you have any questions, please do feel free to ask them. So yeah, that's basically it. That's how easy it is to open the Avata 2 and to get at the gimbal itself.